Republicans in the Senate have killed a resolution that would have put limits on President Trump's ability to take action in Venezuela. 5 Republicans had broken rank last week to advance a war powers measure, many concerned about the possibility President Trump would order troops on the ground in Venezuela.
This is absolutely wild, and we need to talk about what just happened in Congress because Trump is facing the loudest, most public blowback he's gotten since coming back to office. Congress is exploding over Trump's Venezuela military operation. Republicans are breaking ranks to vote against Trump. Democrats are openly calling for impeachment. And Trump himself is admitting that if Republicans lose the midterms, he's going to be impeached. That's not speculation from Democrats. That's Trump telling Republican senators directly that losing Congress means impeachment proceedings begin immediately. And here's what makes this moment so significant. 5 Senate Republicans actually voted with Democrats on a war powers resolution to limit Trump's military authority. 5 Republicans broke from their party to tell Trump he can't just launch military operations without congressional approval. That's unprecedented. That's Republicans publicly rebuking Trump over constitutional violations. But that's not even worst part. After those Republicans voted to advance the resolution, Trump personally called them and threatened them. This is Congress staging open rebellion against Trump while Trump is simultaneously threatening everyone to maintain control through fear rather than respect for law. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Patrick Smith's show to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe, because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what actually happened. Trump launched a military operation in Venezuela without getting congressional authorization. Just decided to do it. Told the military to execute the operation. Bypassed Congress completely. This is direct violation of the War Powers Resolution. The War Powers Resolution is a law requiring presidents to get congressional approval before launching military operations overseas. President can do limited operations for short periods, but anything beyond 60 days requires congressional authorization. Trump violated this, launched military action against Venezuela without bothering to consult Congress. And when Congress found out, Democrats and Republicans both freaked out. Share this video with everyone you know because Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia filed a war powers resolution to limit Trump's ability to expand the Venezuela operation without congressional approval. And this is where it gets remarkable. 5 Senate Republicans joined Democrats to advance the resolution. Josh Hawley from Missouri, Todd Young from Indiana, 3 others. These weren't moderate Republicans from swing states. These were senators voting against Trump on matters of constitutional authority and war powers. The resolution advanced, passed the initial procedural vote, was on track to actually pass and constrain Trump's military adventurism. Think about what that means. Congress was actually functioning as a check on presidential power, Republicans and Democrats coming together to enforce constitutional limits, telling Trump he couldn't just launch military operations unilaterally, requiring him to work with Congress like the Constitution mandates. This was institutional guardrails working. This was the system designed by founding fathers operating as intended. Legislative branch checking executive overreach. Bipartisan consensus that president had gone too far. Now let me bring the receipts on what Trump did next that reveals everything about how he maintains power. Trump personally intervened, started calling Republican senators who voted for the resolution. And according to reports, Trump threatened them, told them they would never be elected to office again if they continued opposing him, promised to primary them in next election, made clear their political careers would be destroyed if they didn't fall in line. And 2 senators, Hawley and Young, completely reversed their positions. Senators who had voted just days earlier to advance the War Powers Resolution suddenly voted to kill it. Make sure you're subscribed to Patrick Smith's show because Hawley actually explained what changed his mind and his explanation is revealing. Hawley said he had multiple substantive discussions with the administration over 5 days. Said administration told him the resolution would tie their hands. Hawley expressed concern about ground troops in Venezuela without congressional authorization. Administration said they don't want to do that. And based on those assurances, Hawley flipped his vote. Think about that reasoning. Hawley voted to constrain Trump's war powers. Trump's team said, "Trust us, we won't abuse those powers." So Hawley decided constitutional constraints weren't necessary. And here's where this gets worse. The final vote required Vice President J.D. Vance to break a tie. That's how close Congress came to actually limiting Trump's military authority. If just one more Republican had held firm, the resolution would have passed. Trump would have been constrained. Constitutional process would have worked. But Trump's threats and pressure campaign succeeded. Republicans caved. The resolution died. Trump's Venezuela operation proceeds without congressional oversight or authorization. And Republican leadership's justification for killing the resolution exposed their priorities. They argued that because there are no troops on the ground in Venezuela, this isn't urgent enough to warrant immediate action. That's the defense. Since Trump hasn't deployed ground forces yet, Congress doesn't need to constrain his authority to deploy them later. It's preemptive surrender. It's saying Trump can do whatever he wants until he's already done it, at which point stopping him becomes impossible. Think about what that means. Congress is saying they won't enforce constitutional limits on war powers until after president has already violated them extensively enough that consequences would be too severe to reverse. That's not how checks and balances work. That's not how preventing abuse of power works. You enforce constitutional limits before abuses happen, not after. You constrain presidential authority prospectively, not just retrospectively. By Republican leadership's logic, Congress has no role in preventing unconstitutional military action, only in complaining about it after the fact. Now let's talk about the impeachment dimension, because Democrats are openly discussing removing Trump from office, and Trump is absolutely panicking about it. Over 140 House members have already voted for articles of impeachment against Trump. Not theoretical future impeachment, actual articles that have been filed, covering Venezuela violations, DOJ weaponization, attacks on judges, use of federal law enforcement as political weapon, all documented, all serious, all potentially impeachable if Democrats controlled Congress to actually pursue proceedings. And Trump himself is telling Republican senators that if they lose the midterms, Democrats will immediately move to impeach him. This came out of closed-door meeting at Republican retreat, Trump warning senators directly. If we don't win in 2026, if Democrats take House or Senate, impeachment proceedings begin immediately. That's Trump's assessment, not Democratic threats. Trump's own conclusion about what happens if political wins shift. And here's what that admission reveals about Trump's legal and political vulnerability. Trump knows his conduct warrants impeachment. Trump knows that if Congress had the votes, he'd face removal proceedings. Trump knows his only protection is Republican control, preventing Democrats from acting on documented violations. That's why Trump is so desperate about midterms. That's why Trump is personally threatening senators who step out of line. That's why Trump is using fear and intimidation rather than persuasion or policy accomplishments. Because Trump understands he's vulnerable, understands his presidency depends on Republicans maintaining control specifically to shield him from accountability. And moreover, Democrats are running impeachment campaigns already. Progressive groups organizing around impeachment demands. Democratic candidates making impeachment central campaign promise. Activists pushing elected officials to commit to removal proceedings if they win majorities. The infrastructure for impeachment is being built right now in anticipation of potential 2026 Democratic victories. All Trump has preventing that from materializing is current Republican control, and that control is fragile. Margins are narrow. Republicans are breaking ranks on key votes like Venezuela. Trump has to personally intervene to maintain discipline. And here's where the Venezuela situation connects to larger pattern of Trump's authoritarian behavior. Trump launched military operation without congressional approval. Trump is threatening to annex Greenland. Trump has deployed forces to multiple countries without authorization. Trump is using American military as personal instrument rather than tool of national policy subject to congressional oversight. This is executive overreach on massive scale. This is president acting like he has unilateral authority to declare war, deploy troops, and conduct military operations wherever he wants without legislative input. Think about what that means. The Founding Fathers specifically gave war powers to Congress precisely to prevent this. They didn't want president who could unilaterally decide to go to war. They didn't want executive with unchecked military authority. They created system requiring congressional approval for military action because they understood danger of concentrating war powers in single person. Trump is systematically violating that constitutional structure, and Congress is trying to push back. But Republican leadership keeps enabling Trump by refusing to enforce constitutional limits. Make sure you're subscribed to Patrick Smith's show because Senator Rand Paul explained the constitutional issue clearly. Paul said Founding Fathers discussed extensively in Constitutional Convention and Federalist Papers that power to go to war was too important to place in hands of one person. From Hamilton to Jefferson across political spectrum, they agreed declaration of war would be with Congress. When America was actually attacked, like Pearl Harbor or 9/11, Congress was nearly unanimous in authorizing military response. That's how system is supposed to work. Deliberation, debate, broad consensus before committing to military action. But Trump is bypassing that entire process. Paul listed at least 5 countries Trump is currently threatening with military action: Venezuela, Greenland, Cuba, Colombia, Iran, all without congressional authorization, all based solely on Trump's unilateral decision. Paul is saying this isn't about any one country or operation. This is about pattern of constitutional violations. This is about president who believes he has authority to start wars on his own without congressional input. And that's exactly what Founding Fathers designed Constitution to prevent. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's defense of Trump's actions revealed administration's contempt for constitutional limits. Bessent was asked whether threats to annex Greenland are serious or just negotiating tactics. Bessent didn't acknowledge any role for Congress in such decision, didn't mention international law, didn't discuss diplomatic processes, just said Trump believes America can't outsource security. That fight for Arctic is real. Better now through peace through strength to make Greenland part of United States to prevent future conflict. Think about what that reasoning assumes. That president can decide unilaterally to annex foreign territory based on his assessment of security needs. No congressional approval required, no treaty process needed, no consultation with allies, no consideration of international law, just president deciding what's good for America and military executing those decisions. That's not constitutional democracy. That's authoritarian rule. That's exactly what Constitution's separation of powers is designed to prevent. And here's where European response shows how seriously America's allies are taking Trump's threats. European nations are developing what they're calling trade bazooka, economic measures that would limit U.S. investment in Europe, potential sanctions against U.S. officials and companies, defensive economic warfare preparations because European allies no longer trust United States under Trump. France, United Kingdom, Sweden, Norway, Finland. Countries that have been America's closest partners for decades are now treating U.S. as potential threat requiring economic countermeasures. And it all represents catastrophic damage to American international standing. Our allies are preparing to economically isolate us. Our partners are viewing us as unreliable or dangerous. Our traditional relationships are deteriorating because Trump is using American power recklessly while bypassing normal diplomatic and constitutional processes. And this isolation makes America weaker, not stronger. Peace through strength requires allies, requires international cooperation, requires other nations trusting American leadership. Trump is systematically destroying that trust through threats, unilateral action, and contempt for international norms. Now let me break down why Trump's behavior around the Venezuela vote reveals his fundamental approach to power. Trump doesn't persuade. Trump doesn't build consensus. Trump doesn't win through policy accomplishments or popular support. Trump maintains power through fear and intimidation. When senators voted their conscience on constitutional matter, Trump threatened them, told them their careers would be destroyed, made clear punishment for independence, and senators caved, changed their votes, prioritized their political survival over their constitutional responsibilities. Share this with everyone because that pattern extends across Trump's entire governing approach. Federal judges who rule against Trump get publicly attacked and threatened. Prosecutors investigating Trump face intimidation and career destruction attempts. Intelligence officials who provide inconvenient information get fired or reassigned. Military leaders who question Trump's orders get removed. Media outlets that cover Trump critically get labeled enemies. Republican officials who show independence get primaried. The pattern is consistent. Cross Trump and face consequences. Stay loyal and receive protection. And here's why this creates such dangerous dynamic. If officials fear consequences more than they respect constitutional obligations, then constitutional limits become meaningless. If senators vote based on what Trump threatens rather than what Constitution requires, then separation of powers fails. If judges rule based on avoiding Trump's wrath rather than applying law, then rule of law collapses. System of checks and balances only works if people in positions of authority are willing to check presidential power despite political consequences. Think about what that means. We're watching in real time whether American constitutional system can withstand Trump's assault on it. We're seeing whether enough officials will prioritize Constitution over their careers, whether enough Republicans will break ranks when Trump violates fundamental principles, whether institutional guardrails can actually constrain president determined to ignore them. And the evidence so far is mixed. Some Republicans like Rand Paul continue resisting, but others like Hawley and Young cave when Trump applies pressure. The outcome isn't predetermined. It depends on how many officials choose Constitution over Trump. Make sure you're subscribed because the 2026 midterm elections have become referendum on whether Trump faces accountability. If Republicans maintain control, Trump continues operating without meaningful constraints, launches military operations without approval, threatens countries without consequence, violates constitutional limits without facing impeachment. But if Democrats win House or Senate, everything changes. Impeachment proceedings begin. Investigations accelerate. Subpoenas get enforced. Trump faces actual accountability for documented violations. And Trump knows this. That's why Trump is telling senators winning midterms is essential. That's why Trump is making preventing impeachment his central campaign message. That's why Trump is threatening Republicans who show independence. Because Trump understands his presidency depends on maintaining Republican control specifically to avoid accountability, not to advance policy agenda, not to deliver for constituents, to shield himself from consequences of his own conduct. Share this with everyone because progressive groups are already organizing impeachment infrastructure, anticipating potential Democratic victories, building coalitions, preparing articles, mobilizing activists, creating political pressure for elected Democrats to follow through on impeachment promises if they win majorities. The groundwork is being laid, the campaigns are being run, the messaging is being tested, all based on assumption that if Democrats control Congress, Trump faces impeachment that could actually result in removal this time. And here's why third impeachment could be different from previous two. First impeachment in 2019 over Ukraine ended with Senate acquittal. Second impeachment in 2021 over January 6th also ended with acquittal. Both times, Republicans protected Trump despite evidence. But circumstances have changed. Some Republicans are more willing to break with Trump. Public approval of Trump remains underwater. Evidence of constitutional violations is more extensive and documented. If Democrats can make compelling case and few Republicans defect, conviction becomes possible. Think about what that means. Trump is one election away from facing removal proceedings with realistic chance of success. One election separates Trump from potential end of his presidency. That's unprecedented vulnerability for sitting president. And Trump's response reveals he understands the danger. Hence the desperation, hence the threats, hence the focus on midterms above everything else, hence the admission that losing Congress means impeachment. Trump is scared and operating from place of fear rather than strength. Bottom line is this: Trump launched military operation in Venezuela without congressional authorization in direct violation of War Powers Resolution. Congress exploded over the constitutional violation, with Democrats filing War Powers Resolution to limit Trump's military authority. 5 Senate Republicans broke ranks to vote with Democrats to advance the resolution, creating unprecedented bipartisan rebuke of Trump's actions. But Trump personally intervened, calling Republican senators and threatening them that they'd never be elected again if they opposed him. Josh Hawley and Todd Young completely flipped their votes after Trump's pressure campaign. The resolution died with Vice President Vance breaking the tie, barely saving Trump from congressional constraint. Hawley explained he changed his mind after administration assured him they don't want ground troops in Venezuela, essentially abandoning constitutional oversight based on Trump's promises. Republican leadership killed the resolution, claiming it wasn't urgent since no ground troops are deployed yet, preemptively surrendering congressional war powers authority. Over 140 House members have voted for impeachment articles against Trump covering Venezuela violations, DOJ weaponization, attacks on judges, and use of federal law enforcement as political weapon. Trump himself is telling Republican senators at closed-door meetings that if they lose the midterms, Democrats will immediately impeach him. That's Trump's own assessment of his vulnerability, not Democratic threats. Democrats are already running impeachment campaigns with progressive groups organizing, candidates promising removal proceedings, and activists building infrastructure for accountability if they win 2026 majorities. Trump knows his only protection is Republican control, preventing Democrats from acting on documented violations. Senator Rand Paul explained founding fathers gave war declaration power to Congress because they believed authority to go to war was too important for one person. Paul listed 5 countries Trump is threatening with military action without authorization, including Venezuela, Greenland, Cuba, Colombia, and Iran, all violating constitutional structure. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent defended potential Greenland annexation based solely on Trump's security beliefs, with no mention of congressional authority, international law, or diplomatic processes, revealing administration's contempt for constitutional limits. European allies, including France, UK, Sweden, Norway, and Finland, are developing trade bazooka economic measures against United States because they view Trump's actions as threatening and unreliable, destroying decades of transatlantic cooperation. Trump maintains power through fear and intimidation rather than persuasion, threatening senators who voted their conscience on constitutional matters until they changed positions. Republican senators caved when Trump applied pressure, prioritizing political survival over constitutional responsibilities, showing checks and balances only work if officials choose constitution over careers. The 2026 midterms have become referendum on whether Trump faces accountability, with Republican control meaning continued violations without consequence, while Democratic victory means immediate impeachment proceedings. Progressive groups are building impeachment infrastructure, anticipating Democratic victories, preparing articles and mobilizing activists around removal as central campaign promise. Third impeachment could succeed where previous 2 failed because some Republicans are more willing to break with Trump. His approval remains underwater, and evidence of violations is more extensive and documented. Trump is operating from a place of fear rather than strength, admitting losing Congress means impeachment, threatening senators to maintain discipline, focusing on midterms above policy, because he understands his presidency depends on Republican control shielding him from accountability for his conduct. Venezuela vote came within 1 senator of actually constraining Trump's military authority, showing how fragile his control is and how close Congress came to functioning as constitutional check. The pattern extends across Trump's governing, with judges, prosecutors, intelligence officials, military leaders, media, and Republican officials all facing consequences for crossing him while receiving protection for loyalty. American constitutional system is being tested in real time to see whether enough officials will prioritize Constitution over political consequences when Trump violates fundamental principles. This story continues. Stay tuned.